Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's day 4 of programming basics. We are doing the belt prep before the exam. I'm going to lay out some rules and show you how the exam is done. But before that, we're going to do some prep on any questions we may have. So the first question was from Dan. And so go ahead and let me know your question, Dan.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at, I'm just trying to think if this is a good example. So on level 6 in the app, and then activity 6, so right there, kind of mid-level there, it gives an example of, it gives the function, and it just gives a name of A with a parentheses, B comma C in parentheses. And then it gives the action, but as we're taught, you first have the function that does, it's saying, hey, this is a function, but at that point, it's not doing anything. It actually has to be called upon, which that's in your line of operations, you go down to where usually it's being called on. I
Okay.
noticed
Okay,
about
how about
midway.
this?
Oh,
I think you have to show your screens because
sure,
it's getting too theoretical. We're working too much in our head at this point.
sure. Let me see. I got split screen, so hopefully this will work here. I think it'll be this one. I hope. Let me see here.
Okay. And
Try.
anyone else, want to prep your question, now is the time to do it. Like prepare your screen to be shared so that you can ask your question.
Whoops. Let's ask. Let me see here.
Will nested loops be on it? That's a fair question. No, nested loops won't be on it.
Sure, why it's not letting me do it.
Did you get that answer, Nicholas? Okay.
It looks like I need to go into my preferences and change my
Okay.
preferences for all that. So it's not that big of a deal. It's basically part of the process. If you're missing that call component of the function at the end, then the function it doesn't do anything. But I noticed there's a time here where it's part of the return. And I think that's the trigger word there's a return function, not return function, but it's the return command. So, but like I said, the example is in levels, it's level 6 and then activity 6. And it kind of gives you just it kind of gives you what I was just looking at. So it's not that big of a deal. Like he explains it really well in there.
Okay. All right. You know what? I can share my screen, go to that one. You said level 6,
Yeah.
activity 6.
Yep.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, this is it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So we have our function. It's called A. That's the name of our function. Okay, and it takes in 2 parameters, B and C. Okay, so these are placeholders for whatever would be used in the function. And we enter the function and we see here, okay, you want me to return B plus C. Okay. All right, so our function is here. We don't do anything until we get to line 5 and we see an action. You want me to console log the value of A. So this is console log the value of A as if A itself were to be a variable like this. But it's not just doing that, it's saying console log the value of A given these 2 arguments, 3 and 5. These arguments get passed into these parameters here. All right, so then we return 3 plus 5. So 3 plus 5 is 8. So the value of A is 8, given 3 and 5. So then that's what we return here. Okay, so try to remember this line even if you don't understand it. And the more you play with return, the more it'll make sense. Okay, that's how it worked for me. And here's what it is. Return a function's value is equal to its return. A function's value is equal to its return. So the value I found for this function a, because that's what it's asking me to console log, is equal to its return. What is the return? B plus C. Okay, what is B plus C? Okay, in this instance, it's 3 and 5. In this console log, it's 3 and 5. So given 3 and 5, our return would be 8. So the value of A is 8, and that's what we console log. Did I make any sense of that, Dan?
Yeah. I didn't have a problem with the return or that component. It seemed, and then maybe it wasn't even on 6, maybe it was 7, but it's not that, it wasn't I think it was more of an identification of something, because the way that Michael Choi teaches it, he's like, all right, you have a function, basically nothing happens until you call upon that function, which we see as, the name of the function, and usually it's in parentheses, right?
Right.
Is that usually the syntax for it?
Yes.
And so up until that point, that's how I knew, or that's how it was shown, that function was now being called upon. And then all of a sudden, like, I think it actually happened with the return component, that's where it switched a little. And I'm probably getting confused, and I don't want to be confusing anybody else. So, but no, that works. That's cool for me.
Okay. So the return gives the value to the function. Think of the function itself as a variable in the T diagram, and that until it has a return, it has no value. It's undefined. Okay, this is undefined. It has no value. If you try to console log A without 3 and 5, it would return undefined, because A by itself, it has to have these arguments. So 3 and 5 get passed in, and in this case, we've switched to 7. It would be 3 times 5, so it would be 15. 15 gets passed to A, and so when we console log function A, the value is returned as 15. Okay, any other questions?
Okay, you said the function, what the function returns is the result of the function. So there's situations in which you just printing something from the function, you don't have to return anything. Is it okay for the function to remain undefined?
Yes, sometimes you have a function that just needs to console log something, and it doesn't need to return anything. Let's share my screen again and go to trace. Okay. And here is an example. This function can run just fine and not have any return. Actually, since we're console logging it, so the question is, what's the difference between a return and a console log, and what's necessary for a function to do, right? Is that essentially the question you're asking?
Yeah, because it's like sometimes where you just print. So like this is almost similar to the example that I'm looking at, where it just printed out the sum and you can just call it with a parameter, but the function itself will still come back as undefined.
Right. Okay. I think I have to see your screen to know exactly what you're seeing.
Yeah, I can show you. It's not on the
okay.
Actual, let me see.
I'll stop my share. Are you ready to share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not with anything that we're done. It's like similar to this. So like you got the sum variable, and then you have the add sum function, and all it's doing is just adding up the sum and the num. And when you call it, the function itself is still undefined. So I just was wondering, like, is it okay for the function to remain undefined if you're just printing like this? Like, does that affect anything?
I see. Okay, does it affect anything? It would affect something depending on what your goal for that function to do is. Okay. So
Okay.
it depends on what the use of the function is, what your goal for using that function is. In this case, when I'm looking at this function, I see, okay, we have a variable sum 0 at the top, function add sum receives a number, okay? And then sum equals itself plus that number. All right. So then we, in this case, pass in 3, then we change sum. So it changes this variable, right? It changes this variable. This function does something. It changes a variable. So in this case, it doesn't, whoever designed this function determined it doesn't need to return anything. I don't need to return anything. I just needed to change this variable. So that's all this function is going to do. It's just going to change this sum variable.
Yeah, I just noticed because when I was writing the functions out, I noticed that sometimes I didn't have to return anything, and I just wasn't sure if it needed to be there. And then when I didn't, it would just tell me that it was undefined. So I was wondering, like, if that affects anything.
It depends on what's being asked. Sometimes a function may use a return. Sometimes it may not. Sometimes it will just console log something. Okay, so a function is something that just does something. A function has to do something. All right, that's the very minimal. It has to do something.
But it doesn't always have to return. It's okay to not have.
It doesn't always have to return.
Oh.
Return is return is a super helpful tool of a function, but not in every case do you have to return something. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? If we don't have any other questions, we'll go into discussion about the test, and then we'll just start distributing the test, and you'll get your first take.
There was a question in the chat. Will return and parameters be on the exam?
Will return. You have to know about parameters. Yes, you have to know about parameters. And will return be on the exam? I'm looking through it right now. Yes, it will be. All right. It will be. Okay, so you'll get your first exposure. It seems like we're getting into that point in this lecture, unless we have another question now. Okay. All right. So what we'll do then is we'll go ahead and get started with that. I'll stop this recording. Actually, you know what? I'll record what I'm going to say here. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to make individual rooms for each one of you. I'm going to create these rooms. You're going to find a room. And when you find your room, make sure no one else goes in it. It's like musical chairs. Okay, I'm going to give you a code. Let me share my screen. I'm going to paste a code in the chat. And you are going to go to take exams and enter the code there. Did you guys see that? Here on this top nav bar, you go to take exams, you enter the code I would give you, and then you click unlock and start exam. The timer starts, it's a 90-minute timer. It's going to start the moment you click unlock and start the exam. It's not the moment I give you the code, it's the moment you click unlock and start the exam. Okay, so sorry.
How long is the exam?
The exam is 10 questions.
So we'll have like a time. It's just as soon as you finish.
90 minutes.
90 minutes. Okay, so it's the first 7 questions you're given you're asked to predict the outcome of the code. The last 3 questions, you have to build code. All right. You have to either complete a function or write a function from scratch that would do what is asked in the prompt. Okay. It's nothing that we haven't already gone over in any of the lectures, assignments. So first 7, predict, write down, and then the next last 3 are filling in code where you would see necessary and building functions from scratch. We're going to do live grading. So what we're asking you guys to do is say, when you're ready to be graded, submit your code. Okay, you have to submit it as a zip. Submit your code first. Double check everything to make sure you know this is the final result, because when we're grading you, you can't change your answer. Okay, submit your code and then type in Discord at cohort dash and then my name, Josh V. And I think it's at Dojo. Vincent. And I think my name as well, you can find. And David's name. Dojo, David at Dojo. I am ready to be graded in room and then X, whatever room you're in. Okay. If you have a question, all right, you guys are allowed to ask us instructors a question. Let us be the judge of whether or not we're allowed to answer that. We may be able to give you an answer. If it's too much help, we'll determine, sorry, I can't help you with this one. You're going to have to do your best. Okay. These are the ways I'd like you guys to post in Discord if you have a question or if you're ready to be graded. This one here is a better example, has all of them highlighted.
So these are for the coding questions on the exam?
These are for coding questions on the exam or when you're ready to be graded with your exam.
And this is excluding the ones where we have to predict the output, right?
Any question on the exam. Any question on the exam. I have I'm just gonna write it for you.
They need 7 out of 7 assignments done, core assignments, right? To take the
Yes,
exam.
you need all 7 of your core assignments to be done to take the exam. If you received a note to say, you have to redo this assignment, then you have to do that before you take the exam. So I'd highly encourage you to finish doing all 7 assignments so you get 3 attempts. What else? If you cheat or plagiarize, you'll be expelled. So don't do that. Don't go in anyone else's room and don't let anyone else go into your room. Okay. As soon as I open up the rooms, you'll see a bunch of room numbers. Just take a room. And it's like musical chairs. Okay. If you get that room, then someone else can't take it. And if you guys go in the room at the same time, someone else just go, right? Just find another room. There's going to be enough for everybody. So you'll figure it out. Okay. So, message on Discord. If you need a question, or if you have a question or you need to be graded. And anything else I should mention? No, I think you guys are all set. Okay, I don't want to overhype this.
I did have one last question. If we did get the notification we were supposed to do an assignment, we did it and corrected and resubmitted, was there any other permission we needed to get to make sure we could take the test?
Oh, if you had to resubmit assignment,
Yeah, I already did.
okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll double check that it's all good, and then we'll give you the code as soon as it's ready. So, how should we do this? Okay, if you don't have all of your assignments, let me double check to see here who has it. Okay, I'll stop the recording now, and then we'll start the rooms in just a minute.
What about